All right, we should be live for episode 1 of Bad Occult Advice, Bad Occult Podcast. Woo!
Yay!
Yay! And we are live streaming this, so there should be recording saved on Twitch. If not, I'm going to be very sad. I'm going to cry.
Oh boy.
And then we'd have to re-record this, which would be even worse.
We'll see.
So, first off, what is Bad Occult Podcast?
And who are these bozos?
And who are these people? Just static images on the screen right now.
Right. We're so raw and unrefined as of this stage. You have discovered us early. So, we are Bad Occult Podcast. We are a spinoff of Bad Occult Advice on Tumblr, which is where you get all of the best advice on the occult.
The best bad advice, yes.
The baddest.
And now we are bringing it to you in auditory format with talking about or doing inadvisable things in the name of magical science.
Yeah.
Trying out that motto. We'll see if it sticks. So, obviously, go ahead.
Who are we?
Who are we?
Who am I and who are you?
Who are we? I am Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow. Go by Tyler or Shadow. And I am a witch and occultist and magical dabbler in general.
Hey, I'm Felix Warren. I'm Hell's favorite. Wherever I go, I talk about summoning demons, and then arguments happen. I do all kinds of magic. I do stuff.
You do stuff, yes. And today the stuff we're going to be talking about is channeling. So, what is the difference between channeling and summoning, I guess, in your opinion?
Channeling and summoning. So summoning, you can basically, that's taking something and putting it in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're basically just saying, show up here, in this circle, in this doll, in this house. Channeling is specifically like, you put that spirit either into a person or they're focusing towards that person and they're coming through that person. They get to speak as, see as, move around as, depending upon limitations.
Right. And it's usually more of a voluntary thing, from my understanding. Like, if you're channeling a spirit, it's not like you're doing a goetic seal, like Solomon's summoning, where you're like, I bind you.
I wouldn't actually assume that.
Really?
There's no reason to assume that a channeling is voluntary. It's not voluntary by default.
Interesting.
I think a lot of channelings are accidental.
Mm-hmm.
And that often the person on the other end isn't actually aware of what's happening.
Right.
Person, spirit, whatever. I don't necessarily say that all of them are like forced or against someone's will, but I think quite a lot of not on purpose happens.
Yeah. So then, how would someone know that they have channeled a spirit or they've witnessed a channeling?
They might not. I guess, like, the first thing that you should just settle with is that you might not know anything in this particular thing, and that's okay. You might not figure it out or find out. But hints that you are channeling or that someone else around you is channeling, I'd say you personally, the listener right now, are channeling. A lot of personality things will happen different, and thoughts will happen differently.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to demonstrate this later.
Yeah.
But basically, when I'm not channeling and I'm me, Felix, there are times where I face difficulties in life. There are times where I'm actually having a pretty good time and using things to, like, the best of my ability and showing off my skills.
Right.
I have all kinds of different emotions, life experiences, and all of that. When I'm channeling, someone else is doing all of that.
Right.
They're using my brain and body to do it, I get some memories of it after the fact. They have some awareness of my memories and brain stuff whenever they're using it.
Right.
But they also have an awareness of not being themselves entirely and being me instead. And my awareness is basically like I come back later and find out what's been done with my house.
So, another thing that I think we should cover to begin with, you've mentioned having experience with channeling. How much experience have you had? Like, I could talk about mine later. And, like, have you found certain techniques to be better for you than others, or?
So, I kind of got thrown into this as a matter of circumstance. I was having things happen where I wasn't remembering things, or I was experiencing being another person. Like, it was happening spontaneously to me. And sometimes I was looking into channeling to see what was going on with me. With channeling, I started noticing, like, hey, I'm not... This Halloween, that wasn't me all the time.
So costuming would be something that would definitely be a technique.
There was one time where I did a book report where I straight up channeled the main character.
Oh, wow.
And it was in, I don't know, like 5th or 6th grade. The teacher had me do it again for the next class to demonstrate, and both times it was freaky as hell.
Right. Now, one thing that I do want to bring up is that there are some people who may have something like DID, dissociative identity disorder, where they basically, facets of their personality are, fantasy characters or like pop culture figures. And I feel like, obviously we're not medical experts, but I have been diagnosed with dissociative symptoms, and I've had experience channeling as well. So, the big difference between what I feel like is a dissociative experience and with channeling is that with any sort of dissociative disorder, your main instinct is to survive the experience. So parts of you that may be active during that traumatic or stressful time period may not be available during calmer time periods. Also, it's very situational, stress based, very triggering based on situations or environments factors. Whereas channeling, yes, it can be accidental, but you do have usually, if not a more complete memory of the experience, a more settled experience, I guess is the best way to say it. Being dissociative is very disorienting, very just very disorienting in general. Dissociative is basically having a disconnect from your body, whereas channeling is, I feel, different than that. So, I just want to get that out of the way first thing. That we are making a distinction between the medical realm of dissociative disorders and channeling.
So they behave differently.
Yeah.
That's the main thing that should be looked at, is that whenever one is having phenomena happen, if the first thing you do is try to diagnose this by symptoms, then I think that's a problem, because you're not slowing down and just observing what's going on. And with channeling versus dissociative identity disorder or any kind of dissociation, I've experienced dissociation.
Yeah.
It is different than this. In fact, It's hard for me to get out of my body while channeling because I'm too interested in the person who's being channeled. They get more of the active short-term and long-term memory, but I do have an experience of being here usually.
Yeah.
Like, even if I manage to go be somewhere else while someone is here, then there's still an experience that I'm having at some subconscious level over here. Whereas when I've straight up dissociated due to like some kind of trauma or exposure to something, that's just like a need to not be here.
Yeah.
And that's completely different. Whenever you've got channeling, you've got people, entities, whatnot coming in, usually on a schedule or a request. It can happen spontaneously, but if someone were to channel spontaneously, then either they would have already been prepared to do that, like they regularly do that, and they do it when the stimulus comes, or something extraordinary is happening.
Right.
And it would usually involve their safety or some kind of urgent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, you've basically got human safety mechanisms in place to keep us from doing this.
Yeah.
By default, bodies tend to have one person in them.
Yeah.
And that person tends to stay in them.
Yes.
So if you have a different experience going on, you're already outside, like, the default.
Right. So, that's some of, like, I guess, our experiences with channeling. What about, like, knowledge research that you've done on, like, channeling or any of this kind of stuff?
There's a lot of research you can do. It depends on, like, if you want to know the historical, you're going to find out about spiritualism or spiritism. Dan Aykroyd's really into it. That inspired a lot of Ghostbusters. That's basically the old seance kind of culture.
Right.
And some of that was hoaxy, but a lot of it was, like, that was how people thought that you should be doing it, was by contacting spirits in this way. I know a little bit about, like, just internationally. Everybody does this. Like, this is not something that just happens in one country or one culture.
There's been history of people saying that they are speaking directly for their god or their deity or their local land spirit. Since I think there's been recorded human history, there's always been some stories, whether like directly channeling or getting messages through dreams and stuff, there's always been some kind of interaction between humanity and the other realms, you may say.
Yeah. And usually, like, you would typically associate an expert with doing this as opposed to just someone doing it on their own. You'd have somebody who was trained for this by a person who was previously doing it. Or you could be a couple of guys like us and have to figure it out on your own for various reasons.
Yes. So, yeah. We don't come from a specific tradition when it comes to magic, occultism, things like that. We just sort of, I mean, I myself have cobbled it together from a lot of different sources, and Felix, I believe you would say the same.
Yeah, I've taken everything with a grain of salt, not because I doubt people's truthiness, but because I question their assumptions sometimes.
Right.
And so, like, we just now watched, Red Letter Media making fun of paranormal investigation shows.
Right.
And, I consider that research.
Yeah.
That's phenomena that is happening out in the wild.
Yeah.
And, just them talking about the things made me find a couple of, like, just logical errors people make a lot about these things. Like, if you're channeling that you need to be in a haunted place.
Yes.
You don't.
Haunted places in general, or like certain energetic areas. A lot of people I've heard they don't recommend, especially like superstitiously, channeling or talking to spirits or using Ouija boards or things like that in your own home because you're opening up your sanctum or your private space to the other world and like
It depends. If you're doing something really big and important, maybe it is time to take that outside of the house.
Right.
But I guess the question is, okay, so if you thought that a really big permanent portal was going to be built into your house's attic because you used a Ouija board, and you went to a hotel instead, what's in the hotel now? What happens to that hotel?
What happens to that hotel room? Like, what happens to that little alcove in the woods? Like, I mean, this is part of a bigger thing. I think it'd be in other episodes where we talk about just like being polite.
Oh, yeah.
Being polite mages or magicians, but you know, small rant that I have is that our local park has been overrun by the teenagers and they are doing stupid stuff like lighting giant fires at night, being stupid. So, you know, there's that general just courtesy to people. Other people use the space, but, you know...
Is it really happening?
Yeah.
Like, if you use a Ouija board in your house...
Right.
What is actually happening? Well, you know, that's a kind of a separate thing,
yeah.
But people get really, really superstitious about, well, things that you would basically get superstitious about.
Right.
But if you channel an entity through you, and then you stop, is there a big permanent portal that got built into your attic? No.
Right.
There's no reason to assume that a portal is anywhere. You don't know how spirits work. You cannot assume that they made a magic door somewhere to get over here. So, like, let's even talk about the house. Like, how am I channeling? How is something from way over there getting over here, completely ignoring light speed barriers and all of that?
Right.
And the answer is, I don't have to know that to channel.
It happened.
We could figure it out later.
We don't have to know all the mechanisms in a silicone chip in order to use our computers or cell phones. So, yeah, that's definitely a good point. Like, I also feel like there's a lot of like emphasis on explaining how you're doing what you're doing when it comes to psychic, paranormal, magical stuff in general. And sometimes it's just like, it works.
Like if you want to catch something is somebody in some kind of like mistake or whatever, like just wait.
Yeah.
Wait until the end of the performance.
Yeah.
Wait until the end of the show. Look it up later. Does it even matter? But, like, I find a lot of people come in, like, wanting evidence.
Yes,
what do you consider evidence, though? Because, like, they are usually looking for some kind of lever or some kind of readout to blip in reaction to something.
They're looking for a gotcha.
They're looking for gotchas. They're looking for something besides their own senses to prove to them that something is happening.
Yeah.
Which I find to be... that's usually a warning sign that you're not trusting your own senses for a lot of other things.
Right. Because, like, that's something as well as, like, a lot of the time, I mean, you brought up the paranormal, the ghost hunters. They're often using things like recorders or ghost boxes or, was it EMP?
EVP, I think. Electric voice projection?
Yeah.
I just don't care.
And the emphasis on not trusting your own senses is very strange to me because, like, I was raised with a very scientific mindset where it's like repeatable, observable results. And obviously, if you can't trust your own senses, how can you trust that you will interpret the results from the things that you are using instead of your own senses, I guess? So, A lot of the times, like, channeling, it's just over time. Experiences, we've caught entities, like, the channeling experience was genuine, but we've caught entities lying before.
Yeah. They can lie on the telephone. It doesn't mean that telephones don't exist.
Just because an entity lies on the channel phone doesn't mean that the channel phone isn't real. I guess.
I think veracity is often at question.
Yeah.
And sometimes the problem is, like, okay, so say somebody is the ghost of Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
So someone who is trying to disprove the person channeling Marie Antoinette might bring up, like, a bunch of Marie Antoinette facts, a bunch of things that Marie Antoinette might know.
Right.
Or should know. Now, if the channeler provides incredibly wrong information, that is definitely noteworthy and a big stain. But if the channeler provides information such as, I don't know, I can't remember, it's a little hazy, and I feel like whatever it is that you have proof of is actually different than what happened.
Right.
Those could be real. They are not proof that this didn't happen. Like, it's just... Okay, so Marie Antoinette died like 200 years ago.
Right.
So how the fuck is she going to remember everything?
Well, not only that, but she's also French.
Like, is she dead Marie Antoinette? Is she living Marie Antoinette? Is this are we time traveling Marie Antoinette?
Are we talking to live Marie Antoinette 210 years ago?
Before she knows what happens?
We've got Marie Antoinette on the phone, but it was before the beheading, so what do we do now?
I mean, this is very personal, but I do actually want to go here. We had an experience where one of us was channeling John fucking Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
The president.
Yes.
And I showed him part of JFK, the movie, and he didn't know how he went out.
Yeah.
He didn't know about the assassination because he just kind of, from his POV, just went out with a bang and that was it. Like, and how's he gonna, even if he did remember a little bit of that at the time, like, how would he, that's probably gonna be the least likely that you remember taking that into the afterlife. So most of what he was remembering was stuff from before that.
Right.
So that's all cool things that happened, but basically what I'm saying is, like, when you've got a spirit who is dead,
right,
and they're being channeled, even if they're aware of the fact that they died long ago, when they find out about stuff that happened in their life or find out about stuff for the first time, it's still very fresh for them.
Yeah.
And they didn't just hang around after the scene of the crime and float over the assassin's shoulder and figure out all the things that happened in the conspiracy. That's not something that JFK apparently did. Instead, he just got confused and then showed up in my living room.
Good way to put it. So, yeah, channeling, like, I mean, you've already mentioned channeling the dead. There are some instances of people channeling still living people. So...
Can we talk about happy science?
I mean, you've already brought it up, and that is definitely a good example. You want to mute real quick so we can make some loud noises together? I just realized we forgot to crack open our sodas.
Why don't we're going to crack open our sodas, and then later we'll edit it. Unless you want to mute it now.
I was just going to mute it now, because we got viewers. And we're back.
People are listening to this? Alright, so... what were we on? Living people, happy science.
Yes, please.
So, the Happy Science Foundation was run by a guy who actually died, I think, last year.
Yes.
And I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's just going to be the Happy Science guy from now on. So the Happy Science guy, he quit stockbroking in about 85 and started his own religion instead. And after starting his own religion, his religion is based on, one, be happy, and you'll be fine. But 2, did you know that you could channel spirits and also there's time travel? So he would channel spirits on live TV or on live Happy Science events or whatever, and Nostradamus and and as I remember, definitely who was president who died during World War II? Eisenhower. No, not Eisenhower. Wheelchair guy. Roosevelt, FDR.
Mm-hmm.
He channeled FDR. He channeled Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
But the real meat is whenever he started channeling Obama and Donald Trump. He was channeling living people.
Mm-hmm.
And giving advice from those living people and giving insight into how they did the difficult things in their lives. And I can't really say, I can't judge the veracity of what he did. I know that there's plenty of scammy stuff that he has done.
Right. But
I can't really say for a fact whether one could or could not channel Donald Trump while he's alive. Mm-hmm. The advice he was giving, the dialogue and everything was really entertaining.
Right. Also, another thing to note was this cult, Happy Science, was started in Japan.
Yeah.
So he was speaking Japanese this whole time. He was not, mentioning all of the people that you mentioned spoke English.
Yeah, all of his stuff is in Japanese. There's translations into English, but he speaks Japanese, and I haven't seen him speak any other language. And I have kind of skipped over the language thing. The language barrier is a real interesting thing when it comes to channeling, because some people do it in another language.
Right.
Some people have more of an accent on things. I've had that come in and out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a matter of attunement. I think sometimes the spirit actually prefers to speak closer to, not exactly accentless, but just more perceived.
Right.
And when it comes to the language center, I do not think that the spirit is sending out individual words that your language center then hears and then, regurgitates. I think that the spirit is sending out thoughts. Usually, if the spirit is using your brain to think with, the spirit is sending out thoughts using your brain's equipment.
Yeah.
That's going to use your own language centers.
And that's something that I'd like to point out as well. When you're channeling entities, dead people, anything like that, you are using your brain as the holding place for them. And so they basically have access to your brain, your body, to, depending on the extent. And so there are going to be things that are incompatible. Like, for example, Marie Antoinette. If you channeled her, she's French. So channeling into an English-speaking person, especially, this is pre-revolution France. So speech patterns, customs, things like that are very different, even from modern-day French. If you channeled as a modern-day French person, Marie Antoinette would have a different experience.
Oh, you would have difficulty because pre-revolutionary French is extremely different.
Right.
But I don't think she would pass through the language center.
Right.
I think that she would send telepathic thoughts, which do not really come in a language. They're like ideas and symbols.
Right.
And I think that would come through to the person speaking.
And that's what I was trying to say, is that, if you're getting transmitted, which is a type of channeling, definitely, not like full possession channeling, but it's definitely a shade of it, that there's situations where your understanding of metaphors or idioms or things like that could cause disrupts in communication, because what they're trying to say doesn't quite translate in your head. Like, there's been times where you and I have, like, done some of this stuff, and it's like, I'm not quite getting the exact phrasing that they want, but this is the equivalent, you know?
I will have a spirit look for a phrasing that they know, not find it. Try to find a match, not find it. And then for minutes sometimes think of what it is that they want to say in particular.
Yeah.
Because they had a precise thing that it is that they wanted to say, or they assumed that if they thought it, we'd have a thing in our language for it.
Right.
Once that didn't happen, it's like a slowdown. They're very particular often.
Right. Very. So that's definitely some like interesting things that we've observed during channeling or related to channeling. Now, when it comes to channeling in particular, are there any like specific things that you do to prepare yourself for it? You know.
All right. So for me,
Yeah.
it depends. I've got regulars.
Right.
For regulars, I have a lot less that I do because we've established some stuff.
Right.
So, but let's say someone isn't a regular. Then it depends. What kind of intel do I have on them? Do I have some confidence that they're just going to come over and be normal?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I think that they actually need some kind of restraint or something?
Right.
Do I just not know? Then I'm going to be secure about things. I'm going to secure the environment in an occult fashion that involves energy, that involves wards and stuff. I'm going to do it in a safer place. I'm not going to do it in a risky place if I think that there's a lot of unknowns. Now, if I've gotten a few really good omens about this one, if a spirit that I know personally has already said, hey, so-and-so really wants to talk with you, I can vouch.
Yeah.
Just go for it. Like, if that's a spirit that I trust, and I've gone for it before and it's gone great, then yeah, I'll go for it.
Now, when you're talking about omens, I'm assuming you talk about things like natural omens as well as like doing divination.
Yeah, I get omens from all over. You've seen it; it's in the space that I'm in, so it could be anything. But like in particular, I get a lot of songs, videos, internet posts.
Yes.
People talking around me and having a conversation that sort of answers the question.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing with omens, and this is just without divination, but just with omens, it's space talks at you.
Right.
You get talked to.
Right.
You're not asking a question. You're just getting told. So, like with omens, it's a little hard to repeat things.
Mm-hmm.
Because whatever it is that tells you things is kind of using causality itself. So if like a couple of people walk by and they happen to have a conversation that's relevant to you, that's not going to happen again in 5 minutes the exact same way.
Right.
Next time you get an omen will probably be a totally different thing.
Right.
And I find this is the part that's really hard for science-oriented people, is this difficulty to repeat causality exactly like that.
Right, because a lot of the times people who have a strictly scientific mindset want things to be repeatable down to the nth degree. Yeah. And there's a level of spontaneity and change that just can't be repeated. Like, you can't have someone come around and have the same conversation 3 times in a row to confirm it. That's just not how the world works.
It's also, so with omens I find that, you know, passerby might say something, but they just happen to be passing by at that moment, and it just happens to be that they happen to be there. Their lives are not being interfered with. But could you imagine a couple of people, like, going through the woods, having that conversation, and then having to come back for some reason and have it again, and then having to come back again and have it again because some mage wanted something confirmed 3 times? That's jerking those other people around.
Right. And that's another thing as well, just talking about, like, general magical courtesy.
You're not the only one using this world.
Right. I mean, anyone knows that we live in a society.
Oh boy, and that society is part of everything that you're going to do.
Right. Whether you like it or not. So, But we're only involving society in as much as we are streaming this live on Twitch. Obviously, we are in a private location, so we're not freaking out the Mondays.
It's not their fault.
No.
I will say that when this stuff happens to you, there's been times where this stuff has happened to me and it's been the same stuff that's happened to me before. But just for some reason, emotionally, mentally, I freak out.
Yeah.
You have had to help me calm down over, like, what some might consider the smallest stuff, because, like, it's not just that it happens. There is something kind of that pushes you when you get an omen, and it's very easy to get spooked.
Yes, it is. And that's another thing why the buddy system is always great. Having someone else with you to verify things. You know, I have said that I have a history of channeling. I am not going to be channeling. Felix is going to be the only one channeling, and that's partially because he has more experience than I do. And he's got a system that he has that I'm still honestly working out for myself. And so he's got it down better than I do. So I have been observing Felix personally. I've observed him channeling for years. Like, and you've observed me channeling for years, off and on. So that's one big thing, is that we are aware of each other as people, how we interact in our lives normally versus how we act when we are channeling. So having someone that is with you who knows you and knows how you're normally like can help distinguish when you may be channeling or something may be going on. Always try to check off the mental health issues or like just straight hallucinations from hunger or some shit like that.
Yeah, if you haven't had sleep in like 3 days, you need to question your observations.
Yeah, but as long as you're of sound mind, we both made sure to eat beforehand. We had to mute to make sure we opened our sodas. Just the basic checklist is our bodies are okay. We're not gonna throw some major curveballs. So being able to check in and also being able to observe things before, during, and after. It's very hard when you are the one having the experience to be able to make observations about the experience while you're in the experience.
It is extremely difficult to do that. And,
right.
Working as a soloist is incredibly difficult because of that.
Yes. So that is definitely one factor. Another thing as well is if you can't have someone with you, video recordings are always interesting.
Review yourself. You will see or hear something that you did not think you said or did.
Yes. Also, the recordings themselves, like, I am going to be very interested in watching back this Twitch stream because sometimes, depending on the entities, there are certain audio or visual glitches that are just part of their confirmation, I guess is the best way to put it, because some entities do have some natural fields that interfere with electronics.
Yeah, and electronics work using electromagnetic fields.
Yep.
Human bodies and any other kind of living body generate electromagnetic fields, and they can be disturbed or influenced by these entities who are probably generating their own EMF from somewhere.
Right. And so, that could also be a thing to look at for, like, evidence or things like that. But, those are things to just sort of keep in mind if you're looking to channel on your own, looking to get into channeling in general. Is there anything else you want to add?
I think besides the EMF stuff, they tend to disturb space-time in a certain way. Or rather, they have a wake in space-time. So whenever you have technological glitches, it may be due to the time dilation or skipping effect just as much as EMF stuff.
Because, like we mentioned earlier with channeling JFK, I mean, he was fresh off his death, which was, over 50 years ago now. So, there are some time distortion things that can go on, simply because you are interacting with an entity or with a ghost or with a personality that they're coming from a different time period than yours. And so there has to be some of that wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff to even make this thing happen.
Yeah, and linear, one thing at a time reality that goes in one direction is in itself kind of an illusion for human minds to keep on being able to go.
Right.
So sometimes what you are detecting, sensing, whatever, is just that illusion giving way to a real reality that you don't usually tune into.
Right.
So...
yeah. No, that's all great points. So... anything else you want to say, or do you want to...
I want to show them what's up.
You want to show them what's up?
Yeah. So, I do want to talk about channeling method before I just punt him in. Could you mute for a second? There's something I forgot to ask you before this started.
Yes, of course. Alright, we've solved that. Producer notes taken.
Had to figure out a couple of things right before I got into things. So, there's a lot of ways you can do this. I'm going to channel one of my regulars. Mm-hmm. So, I just have a piece of jewelry that I wear whenever I'm channeling him. And whenever I do that, I take off the other piece of jewelry that I wear whenever I'm being me.
Right.
And I'm going to say what that is. I take off my wedding ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put on a different one. Maybe I don't put it on the finger, maybe I put it somewhere else. I'm not going to get too much into detail. But this wedding ring, this knows being me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily have to take it off to channel, but at this point I've made the habit that whenever I'm a different person, this comes off.
Yeah.
And it's actually really helped. Your body's connection to current physical reality is such an important cue for who you are.
Yeah.
And giving that physical cue to the next person who comes in is really helpful to them because then they can settle much easier as well.
Right.
So there could be something about energy resonating and encoding into the structure of the physical stuff. I don't have the equipment to test that. So it's just a theory I can't do anything with.
Cool. So,
I'm getting out the ring, and I'm going to stop being Felix for a while. I might be in the background, but I'm going to mostly give the floor to Rob, who is going to introduce himself. You know what? I'm going to just let him do that.
cool.
So, floor goes to Rob. See you later. Felix out.
So, on stream, I have switched the visuals because we have prepared this ahead of time for this one. This is this is Rob, who Felix often channels. This is the name he wants to be called at this time. Other people have known him by other names and other titles at different times, but this is Rob, as we know him right now. I love the picture that Felix drew for him. I
haven't seen it.
Yes.
Where did he put it? I want to see the picture.
The...
I'm not talking at the mic. Sorry, I just got here. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the physical drawing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He didn't even tell me he was looking at me. Put that away so it's not recursive.
Welcome.
Hi, it's my first podcast, probably.
Yes.
So I'm Rob. I'm a demon that Felix has been working with for a while. I also do other things that don't necessarily go under the heading of demon, kind of a spirit of all trades. Do a lot of afterlife stuff. Currently in a body somewhere. We'll talk about it later. I am actually alive right now, somewhere else, coming from that body, channeling into here.
Yes.
So, I know I've said that I haven't been on a podcast before, but it's a different energy than coming over here just to the living room to hang out.
Is it?
Yeah, I feel a lot different.
How do you feel different?
I can sort of feel being live.
Really?
Being broadcast in a way that obviously we don't do that when we just hang out here. So, yeah.
Obviously you're not used to this format because I keep having to remind you to speak louder into the mic.
So, apologies for that. So what you know about me is that I'm Rob.
Yes.
That's all you know so far.
You are Rob. So I have a list of questions that we've basically come up with. This isn't going to be the only episode where we do channeling. Felix is going to channel other entities, things like that. But we have a list of specific questions. So we already gave your name is Rob. Mentioned, a demon that Felix works with. Gender identity.
Oh, so, I don't really care, but consistently I've been he, his.
Awesome. And just for fun, coast to coast style, where are you calling in from?
It's a long story. You know this one.
You're calling in from somewhere else.
I will say it. I'm just saying you know this, so you're not going to react to it. I am calling in from a spaceship in outer space.
Ooh.
And
we've got a live alien.
I'm not really going to go into it. We're going to have a whole different podcast for that kind of thing.
Right.
But part of Felix and I and all of us really discussed this together. We could just not mention the spaceship thing, and I could be a big spooky demon coming from nowhere.
Right.
And I don't think that would be honest. I want to talk about what it is that's actually happening to the extent that I can.
Right. And we appreciate the honesty as much as you can be. So, what do you do?
Well, currently, what do I do?
What do you do?
What do I do all the time?
What do you do? I
What
mean,
do
you
I
sort of
do?
mentioned that you work with, afterlife, things like that, demon stuff, but what
Yeah.
do you do?
So the thing is, I have a lot of different levels of existence.
Right.
So on a certain level of existence, I'm often basically helping shuffle people from their mortal coil and into the next realm of their existence.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something that I do in my body when I'm on the spaceship. It's a completely different level of existence. There's also, because I am a living person right now, I have had lives before that. Mm-hmm. And so in those lives, I have done different things. And because I am experiencing existence as a multidimensional being, I am aware of those lives currently doing their things currently because the present is all moments in time, and it's stupid crazy. Also, for a little bit, I was JFK.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird. I'm still figuring it out myself.
Yeah.
There's times I doubt me, like it's in my physical body. It's not in the middle of doing spooky stuff that I do, but everyone's got a level of existence that they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And part of life and existence is coming to an understanding about that. So, I'm doing a lot of things at once. Going through a period of self-discovery. You know, I'm finding me.
You're finding me. You're finding who is Rob.
Who is Rob? Rob's a lot of things.
But who does Rob want to be in this moment?
Right now, Rob just wants to be the guy on this podcast.
The quiet guy on this podcast.
I'm not going to be the quiet guy.
Well, you are auditorily a lot quieter than
Oh,
Felix.
I'm so sorry. I do have a completely different vocal register than Felix.
Yes.
Watch me try to change it. Hi, I'm Felix Warren.
Oh my god, no.
I sometimes do a podcast.
That was so bad.
I can't.
You
I'm
can't.
at this register. It's where I am.
I know.
Moved closer to the mic
Thank
for
you.
you.
That'd probably help. So, in your... I mean, obviously your view of reality is very different than Felix's and different than mine. You've already mentioned that you do have more of a multidimensional level of reality, which is sort of breaking my brain just saying.
Yeah, same.
But, like, Felix has mentioned that you are a long-term, you're a regular, quote-unquote. So, I guess, like, from your end of things, being an entity that is channeled, like, what is that like for you?
It's strange. Everything's a little bit different than you would expect in the Order when it comes to linearity here. I feel fresh off the boat as a ghost in some ways, while I'm a living guy who's kind of... I'm on a spaceship now because my life kind of turned upside down. And so the stuff I was doing before then was also pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, my life is so crazy right now that actually this other stuff is just kind of a cherry on top and kind of a welcome distraction sometimes.
Ah, so is it kind of like in your body you just sort of zone out and then you're like here?
Oh, so how am I doing this? Everybody has different ways of projecting. I actually have a different one than some people have talked to me before about. Most people I know, they take a recliner or they lay down, often on the back. I tend to sit in a chair and, at a table or desk and have an open book. The physical me is reading, and it's a book that I've read a lot before. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like if you read a book that you've read so much before, it's sort of automatic. While I'm doing that, my mind basically becomes over here.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started doing things like this, it was as if... First time, it was like I closed the book. It was Redwall, I'll just say it. I closed a Redwall book. Felix hasn't read any of these. So he doesn't know which one. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't remember that scene happening. That was pretty cool. I looked for it.
It wasn't there.
It's not in there. But it was real, and I remember it. The characters acted just like, and it must have... maybe it was the wrong chapter. I'll look through the whole book again. Where was it? I know it was there. So, I did that as a reading thing for a while, and it was only recently that a friend who's really good at advising on this psychic stuff suggested that I use that open book method for projecting. Because before that, what I was doing was basically walking around the room, sleepwalking, doing the same gestures and motions as I'm doing over here. Just a lot of physical toll on me, and also it makes me look crazy.
Yeah.
Now I'm just sitting down reading a book. It's a lot more relaxing.
Gotcha. So it sounds like there's like a process and learning from your end of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like how to be safe while you're operating the controls of another body, essentially, in this case. So That sounds complicated.
It could be. Everyone does it a little different, and what I've found is it's best to just base it on how you've already been working.
Mm-hmm.
If you already have had something that works a little bit, then making that into something that really works.
Right.
That's like probably a good place to start, because everyone does this so differently that there's no one trusted method that everyone sticks with.
Right. Interesting. So, now, from your point of view, how long is, like, how long, I don't know if timing is the right way to put it, but, like, do you feel like you've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time? Have you channeled into other people besides Felix? Like, can you provide any insight into, like, your experience with Felix versus other people?
So
Can you remember any of that?
I can get into a little bit of it. I had an important job in space before I went onto the spaceship. Right now I'm on vacation. And while I had that important job, couldn't really focus much on what are my past lives, what are my other dimensional selves doing. And I wasn't really very collected together. I just thought of myself as a person who is doing important things and sometimes has my own private life. And during doing those important things and during my private life, Felix was intruding on me. I like to blame everything on Felix because it's accurate. Felix isn't the only one who's ever done this. I have heard about it all the time. There's an entity who's doing important things, and a human or other type of, I'd say, lower level entity just happens to notice them. Mm-hmm. And they end up in a fanfic or a fan art or a movie.
Now, how is that different than being directly channeled by the thing that has noticed you?
So there's me over here. I came over here now.
Right.
But first it was kind of like Felix was channeling into me. He just sort of ran across my path. I'm doing some stuff, and then suddenly hand moves strangely. Lot of stray, I wouldn't call them intrusive thoughts, but not my type of thoughts. It didn't feel dissociative, it just felt like someone extra had just sort of, was just like, oh, look what's going on with you, you're pretty neat. Which sounds just like him, doesn't it?
Yes.
So, Felix had a tendency to just search around for nearby entities that were interesting to, spectate?
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be one of those, and I don't know how many of those entities that he visited actually called back, but at some point I made a phone call back.
Mm-hmm.
And from there we've basically engaged in a rapport.
Right.
That's kind of brought me to an awareness of the rest of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I, in my physical existence as a person in this, in this space, because I started having this spiritual contact from Felix, it started awakening me to, hey, when are the other times this is happening? Psychic stuff is a thing where I am. Like, people just talk about psychic stuff. It's not like on Earth where it's often a crackpot thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would be engaged with people about psychic stuff, but I wouldn't really know how to say, so do you ever have a random Earthling talk to you in the middle of your thoughts? Because that's not something that you talk to other people about. Especially if
So there's still taboos, even in your environment.
It's not normal.
So, Felix apparently was part of your, I guess, psychic awakening, which is very interesting. Now, since you have sort of a dual awareness of you being channeled here, and as I understand, your body in the spaceship, I guess, Do you have an awareness of other times you've been channeled by other people? Or, like, is that something that it's like confidentiality, you don't want to talk about too much, you know?
Now that you're asking, let me think about it.
Yeah.
I just switched books. Apparently went through that one really fast. Um,
Ooh, fun. Updates from the other side.
I always keep another one with you if it's something you go through pretty fast. So, let me think about that, and I might have to reach over and think about it doubly. My awareness of being channeled like this is much different than my awareness of occult things happening to me. And usually when people have been doing occult things with me, they've been calling upon the god forms or spirit stuff.
Right.
Felix managed to page in to meet me.
Mm-hmm.
M-E-A-T. Me. Which is just something that no one else bothered to do?
Knew was possible? Was aware that maybe there was a meat person behind the persona? Yeah, Felix is really good at getting down to the nitty gritty about things. But, like...
So, let me think of awareness of others channeling me. And you know, we didn't really do this channeling thing here that I'm just demonstrating. Like, this kind of thing is actually pretty recent.
Right.
Coming through like this so clearly. Most of the stuff that's happened to me has been a lot more of the seance and candles, Ouija board, teenage boy who wants to get laid, D&D party kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So those kind of inspirational, like, maybe you're having to push a planchette around, but not full-on channeling aware as yourself.
Well, they're contacting me as a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And they expect things from demons. Everyone expects certain things from demons. Not everyone, but it's pretty consistent. And so most people don't even really think about whether or not I might have a body.
Right.
They think I'm on some sort of infinite hell plane, or that something is different in outer space than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I technically am in the heavens. Ha ha ha.
It counts.
And I'm not saying that all demons are spacemen.
Right.
I'm saying that this one is.
So, if you had any advice for anyone who would think of channeling you specifically.
Me, Rob?
You, Rob.
Oh, boy.
Because I'm sure there's going to be at least one.
Alright. I'll tell you what I carry with me most regularly in terms of the mood, the aura, whatever. You see it in the portrait that's there. You're going to get a hard-boiled film noir detective with a gun who's got a pretty soiled past.
Mm-hmm.
I come from the past as much as I come from the future. And if someone channels me or tries to work with me right now, they're probably going to get basically the gangster era me.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not be very easily trusting. I might be very on edge, and I will probably carry a huge sense of danger with me.
Right.
So, also, where I'm not quiet.
No.
I tend to blow a lot of fuses, so take some precautions just on a practical level.
Yeah. Yeah. You are not recommended for Babby's first channeling. I would say, as an outside observer,
I don't think it would be much fun for them.
no. Now, if I mean, I honestly got to say, good luck. It's a very specific, very deep cut, and very hard to pin down out of the vast number of selves that I believe you have.
To be honest, I look forward to it.
Yeah. So, yeah. But that's pretty much all the questions that I had. You know, do you have any advice that you'd like to impart to our viewers? Good, bad, otherwise? We are bad occult advice.
Very common question that Felix has received on his advice channels. He's run various advice blogs. Is what's a good starter spirit / starter demon? Mm-hmm. And I understand why people ask this one. And I'm going to answer it. He answers usually saying that you can't do that. Now here's the thing. You're getting this advice from a demon who knows other demons. And I could just say, like, one demon I don't like and say you should start with that guy all the time.
Start with that guy. Don't start with me.
I will say, okay, so the list of... whatever list of demons you're looking at. What's the first one at the top of the list? And the second one, and maybe even the third, fourth, fifth? Well, all those demons, all those spirits, have been called a million billion times because usually when someone starts something up, they start at the top of the list.
Yep.
So, instead of just starting at the top of the list for whatever it is you're doing, instead of going straight to the end either, just, like, look through. See if something calls to you. See if something pulls you, like, in a good way. Something seems...
Do some bibliomancy. Open the book up to a random page. See what stands out.
It's just the vibe. The vibe needs to be good. It needs to be something like, you know, this is the vibe of someone that I want to talk with and engage with and who's not going to, like, screw me around. Because there will be some that try to send out the vibe of, oh, you totally want me. I'm the best. I'm the best demon you're ever going to call up. You're not going to want to call up any other demon. And guess what? They can just try to convince you of that whenever they show up.
Right.
Can I say something, actually? This is going to be big because this is not the podcast for this.
Oh no. Oh no.
You know why you need to be careful with demons?
Uh-oh.
It's not anything that anybody expects because they're expecting hellfire and brimstone and soul possession and firstborn stealing. Demons know hypnotism. They can mess with your mind. They can make you do things.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, be cautious. Any one of us could probably wrap a human around our finger if we really tried and had a reason to.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if we don't have a reason to, why are we really going to try?
Very, very true. Yeah. No, I'm glad you touched on that. Hypnotism is definitely going to be something we're going to talk about in a future episode. But yeah, we're getting some really great audio. Thanks, Kat.
Oh, you.
I love the producer notes.
You know what? You could do that over here where you don't do that so loud.
Right next to...
over here.
See, and this is why we ask one of our regulars to come over on our first episode, because sometimes they have to do things like get the cat. Because I can't move. I've got all this computer equipment in front of me.
I've been over plenty of times.
Thank you so much, Rob, for handling our producer.
So, I'm very comfortable. Are you going to come over here and eat the food again? Are you going to find the... Nope? Okay.
He's going for the water now.
Good kitty. So, I've come over here so many times, I'm used to handling the cat and doing productive things.
Right.
You should not get used to a demon doing this.
No.
I'm not saying that it's an unusual arrangement. I don't know what the usual arrangements are, to be honest. How would I even take that survey?
So, yeah. You know, that's part of the reason why we didn't channel someone that Felix has never channeled before for this first podcast episode, because it's our first one.
He considered Marie Antoinette for several minutes.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure he did. I would have been very upset because we did not have graphics available.
Well, he didn't even bring it up, so that's about how far it got considered.
So, yeah. Thank you so much, Rob, for being willing to come up and share some of your experiences from your end. As a channeled entity. Yeah. So, any other parting words, or can we get Felix back for the wrap up?
Well, I'd like to point out that you can just do this. You could say, "Hey, would you like to go? I would like my husband back."
Yeah.
Now, the traditional way would be to banish me or send me on to have some kind of specific parting, and then I leave, and then another thing has to happen. But Felix and I have an arrangement. So
yes.
I just go and he comes back. And that's basically what I'm going to do. So do not take anything that I said or did during this podcast as normal or an indication of what's going to happen to you your first, second, third, or 30th time.
Yes.
I'm not saying that Felix is a special boy and he's an extremely special case. I am saying that I have been working with Felix for years. And so after you work with someone for years, yes, they will pick up your cat and bring him to the other food dish so the podcast is more quiet. Until then, you may not get that with them.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it here on That Occult Podcast.
I'm going to dig through the rings. All right. Thank you for having me on. Thanks to anybody who listened to me. If you summon me later, I want whiskey. And cigarettes.
Oh.
Goodbye.
Wow. Well, that is quite the farewell. I'm going to get Felix back here in just a minute. But yeah, basically, that can be what a channeling thing is like. Welcome back, Felix.
Whew.
Can hear you. Doing some just narrating for
I can't really
listens.
tell from my... Did he have big energy tonight?
He had big energy.
Shit, he did. Alright. I haven't even put the ring back on yet. I'm just holding it. Ha!
There we go.
Yeah, I don't smoke cigarettes.
No.
He meant tobacco cigarettes with the nicotine in them. I'm not telling you to smoke those, but yeah, he can't get them from me.
I guess that's the cost if somebody listening to this podcast wants to channel Rob. You better be a smoker, because that's what he's looking for.
Cigarettes are an extremely common spirit payment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am gonna, as part of the demonstration of channeling, I want to tell you how it is coming in now. For one, I don't know if I've ever come in after Rob with him feeling like that. He definitely showed up today. He's usually a lot more chill here, I think, because he's just hanging around with one person and laying low. Yeah, he was really feeling his oats. When I came back into the body, it was a little difficult for a moment, just because it was so charged up that it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just like it was full of pop rocks.
Poppin'.
And so I took a moment to settle in. I'm gonna do a very quick grounding. I'm not gonna go through the specific grounding that I do, but
it's okay. Basically, one of the things you should do after you channel is take stock of your body, like Felix has been doing. He's noting the differences in his emotional state and his energy levels, like literal physical energy levels. Sometimes when you channel, you may be feeling bleh beforehand, and then, like he said, full of pop rocks, very active, energetic afterwards. definitely doing a grounding and centering exercise just to like remind your body that you are the one in it now is always a good idea. Anything else you want to bring up now that you've
To engage the body more, eat and drink, pet a cat, engage with tactile things, maybe take a walk, but be careful about that. You might not want to be getting outside a whole bunch yet.
yeah.
Because you're going to be around a whole bunch of, like, maybe people or other stuff that might be unshielded, and you might want to take it slow.
Take it slow. You just opened yourself up to something bigger or different. I don't like the term bigger or smaller or higher or lower consciousness because it's different.
Yeah.
You know?
So I can remember some things that Rob talked about, and as you said that, I can remember when he talked about that.
Right.
So, lack of a way of phrasing it for him, but we don't really have it. It's not that there's this big higher lower difference between a god and a human.
Right.
It's that if someone is in a god form, wherever they're doing that, they've kind of like unpacked themselves energetically, psychically, and so when they've unpacked it and unfolded themselves energetically and psychically, they're gonna be like bigger.
Right.
A human in a brain, conscious, waking, is going to be packed up and aligned in a way to do that regular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not that one's bigger and one's smaller, but we do have to do this body thing. I have to keep up a consciousness that remembers what day it is and,
right.
Practical stuff. And, I mean, that's a big trade-off. There's sometimes whenever one of them channels into me and they don't have any concept of that thing.
Right.
They can't help us at all in day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
They could tell us what's going on in frickin' Nirvana, though.
Yeah. So channeling is something that if you have very strict practical day-to-day things that you have to do, channeling isn't a recommended activity, though, I mean, we are bad occult advice, so do whatever the fuck you want. But, yeah, there are trade-offs. Like, our life is structured very differently because of the things that we pursue in search of scientific or as much scientific style understanding of these occult topics as we can find. But being aware of the fact that, normal mundane life isn't very conducive to some of these entities is very important as well.
Yeah, it's like, it's not that it harms them or anything, but if someone is unpacked on a deity level beyond time, it's very difficult for them to keep a regular schedule.
Yeah.
At the same time as that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like with Rob, he's got his person self that's a lot more familiar with, like, taking out the trash.
Yeah.
His God form self, honestly, if he took out the trash, it would probably make something happen in the underworld.
Yeah, because, like, that's another thing as well, is, like, symbolic gestures. A lot of, like, gestures that may seem to be mundane or normal to us, if you are channeling an entity that is on one of those, like, more unfolded, multi-dimensional, multi-reality levels, approaching something like a deity or a god form or even a demon or an angel in those kind of ways, there could be a ripple effect on time or in events because a deity took out the trash instead of the human whose body they're piloting,
Yeah, it's like a disturbance. It's a very unexpected disturbance because we do expect disturbances.
Right.
Every 4th of July, we expect the sky to explode in America, And it's normal, because everybody's popping off fireworks right then. You don't expect that disturbance, like, in the middle of April.
Right.
And if you had that disturbance in the middle of April, it would be considered, like, very weird, and people would check in and say, what's going on?
Right. So, yeah, those kind of things be aware of. Also, give yourself time to come down off of the experience. We don't normally talk about this in this way so soon after a channeling.
I will say I'm a little unfocused in this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
I am trying to demonstrate what actually happens. Like, I am losing the thread a little bit. Not in the worst way, but usually I would not show up to a podcast this way.
Right.
Certainly not in the beginning. But in the aftermath, there's going to be a period where I'm going to want to sit down and kind of just, like, unpack. Okay, what happened while Rob was over here? I will not remember all of it, but my body wants to give me a couple updates.
Right.
My brain wants to be like, hey, here's the things that went on with the house while you were gone.
Right.
And, like, until that happens, I am going to be a little unsettled and a little off.
For me in particular, one thing that I notice that my body always wants to do is let me know what memories were accessed. And I think that's probably a personal thing with me. But yeah, that's something that after a channeling, I usually get flash memory of, oh, this is the memories that got pulled up by the entity. This is my personal narrative, storyline, timeline of events that entity is now aware of. And it could be something as mundane as, like, pulling up a memory to try to get an understanding of, like, if someone mentions the Care Bears or something. But for me, that's something that's very important to me. So
it's interesting, like, I'm scanning back through if any of that happened, and, like, I know he made a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reference.
Yeah.
But, like, that's not extremely important to me, but once I thought about it as, like, references, it immediately came to mind.
Interesting.
Like, because they have to use our brains to make references.
Yes.
Like, by the way, how long do you want this to run? Because I'm fine talking more about this.
We're good. I mean, we've only been running for hour 20.
Yeah, so, this is a big thing with how some people hear entities like Rob speak like he did just now, and they use stuff like flip turned upside down,
yeah,
and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reference as evidence for how he's not real.
Right.
Which, by the way, you can't prove that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is not available in space.
Literally, we cannot prove that the radio waves haven't made it out wherever the fuck he is.
So, but I asked about this with several entities, because every now and then one will make a reference, and I'm like, hey, is that something you're getting from Tyler's brain that you're inhabiting right now? Or is that something that you know from where you are?
Yes.
Because I want to know. I want to know if you know that. It's interesting to me. I'm not trying to disprove anyone.
Right.
I find that if you are kind of looking, not necessarily to disprove, but if you are kind of critical-minded, just keep that in the back of your mind and make a little tally for the entire conversation.
Yeah.
Think about it afterwards. Make your conclusions afterwards. Practice good espionage. If you think someone's lying to you for the whole conversation, let them do it. Figure out what to do about it afterward.
I mean, even, like, it's like anything. If you're suspicious of someone, it's usually not a good idea just to immediately confront them, because they're going to deny, deflect, and disable. And so, we've been doing this stuff between ourselves for years. I'll admit, there are notebooks probably packed up in a box somewhere, where I was keeping notes on entities like Rob. Because we have had liars before. We have had entities come in and pretend to be someone that we knew. And being critical and studying, the basics of personalities and, is more difficult whenever someone is being channeled versus, talking to them in their own body face to face. But there are still things that you can track. If someone is insisting that they know this specific event, but they're always getting this certain detail wrong, or if they're like saying that they are a certain entity, but they don't like, I don't know, the color green, and normally the entity is associated with the color green. That is a thing to question. Just don't immediately jump down their throats and be like, aha! Because first off, that can disrupt the person channeling, the body channeling,
So one thing about that is that, like I said in the very beginning, this is not always by total knowing consent.
Right.
So here's going to be a downgrade in status. I am going to give everyone the most mundane thing that can happen in terms of channeling. Guess what? You caught a human dreamer.
Mm-hmm.
Human dreamers happen all the time. A human dreamer is humanly dreaming. And so if they show up in someone's body and it's suggested to them who it is that they are, they can follow that suggestion.
Right.
And not just a human dreamer, but plenty of entities, whenever they show up in a body for the first time, you don't really know where they're coming from unless you manage to aim real good. But if you're getting someone you didn't have before, you don't know what state they were in before they ended up in you. They could be very confused. And a lot of entities, when channeled, will go by assumptions. In fact, most of them try to just
blend,
go with the flow, blend, and then leave when they can.
Yes.
And so you will probably get some conflicting answers and interactions your first couple of times, especially if you have somebody who was just coming in by accident or who just comes in regularly, does the dishes, and leaves without getting noticed.
Yeah.
A real thing that can happen, by the way.
Yeah. Some entities see being channeled as an escape from whatever their life is on the other side. So, that's something else to be aware of, is if you are constantly feeling the need to channel a specific entity, be aware that it might be an escapism for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not healthy. That, I'm just saying, using being channeled as an escape is not healthy.
And using channeling as an escape for their life is also not.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit on that, because one thing that we've been doing with entities consistently, that they don't usually have happen with them, is that we check in with them. Mm-hmm. So if I notice that someone isn't who I think that they are, a couple ways that you can handle that are real healthy for both you and the entity. One, consider whether it's even worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It may be a one-time affair. It may not be that anything really serious is happening, and so you can just let the interaction go and then discuss it later. With for instance, we've got a 2-person operation going on here.
Right.
So if you channel someone and it turns out they're not who I expected them to be, then I could talk with you about that later.
Yes.
And when it comes to the entity being channeled, while I notice, I start to notice, hey, you're not who we expected, but you're acting like you think you're who we expected. And so just knowing that and observing that and just interacting with them regularly, it's kind of, I don't want to linger too much into mental illness stuff, but when someone is having a dissociative episode, or more like a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
When they're experiencing psychosis, which is basically
any kind of break from...
They're experiencing something different than you are.
Yeah.
So if they're experiencing something different than you are, sometimes you need to play into the experience that they're having, and not contradict it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you contradict it, they'll freak out.
Right.
And so consider just yes-anding them a little bit. Feel out your sense of truthfulness and sincerity.
Yeah.
And it's not just about truthfulness, because sometimes people think they're saying the truth, they just don't know that they're saying a lie. It's more like, are they coming from a sincere place? Are they saying something out of real concern? Are they protecting themselves or someone else?
Right.
And so just, like, checking in with the entities, like, hey, I've noticed that you channeling, like, every day over here. Is something going on in your life that you want to talk about?
Right.
Because I know that over here is a really good break for you, and you might feel like you need to do it, but if you talk with me about it, maybe you'll think of some other options as well. Because a lot of times they've never talked to anyone about this.
Yeah. And that's something that, like, we'll probably talk about in another episode, just looking at the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is our good first episode on channeling, giving people just a basic idea of what our experiences with channeling, our style of channeling is. You know, feel free to reach out once we post this episode, with your experiences, your questions. I mean, I don't know how much Rob will be able to answer directly, but feel free to send in a question or two to Rob
He's
if you want.
freaking game.
No promises on what kind of answers you're going to get, but, you know.
And it won't just be Rob. Rob, okay, I'll be honest. We promised Rob that he was going to be on this episode.
Yes.
So it was going to be Rob.
We drew a picture for Rob. Well, Felix drew a picture for Rob. We already knew that he was going to be there. So, but, you know, there's going to be other entities that going to be channeled that may have various levels of okay to interact.
Yeah, and I'm going to prepare an image for the mirror to kind of just have a question mark so that we can have someone show up who we don't have a avatar for, as it were.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, the biggest thing is, like, I'm being healthy with what it is that I do here with the channeling.
Yes.
And so you're not going to be able to get every entity possible with me on this show.
And you're also not going to be able to get, like, live responses. Like, if you send in an ask to BOA and ask specifically for Rob to respond, he may not.
Yeah, well, I would say wait for the next episode for it, and and see if he does. I cannot guess at what he will choose to do. This is the first time he's been able to do this.
100% saying, you know, just because an entity shows up on an episode of BOP, doesn't mean that they're available 24/7 for questions through Felix.
They're not available 24/7 to me.
No.
Period. Sometimes I'm like, hey, what's up? And I get
Static.
Snores.
We get very different experiences, obviously. So, but yeah, that just sort of gives you an idea. Thank you for tuning in to Occult Podcast, where we do and talk about inadvisable things in the name of magical science. I am Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
I am Felix Warren, and I have been Rob for a little bit.
And thank you so much for tuning in. Next episode will be when we record it.
Yeah.
Next live stream will be when we decide to record it. Keep an eye on Bad Occult Advice on Tumblr. That's where we post all our stuff. Post when we're live. Give a link to the Twitch. And thank you to the people who stopped by. Saw we had a few people stop in and out throughout the stream. Thank you to Felix again for the lovely, lovely drawings that you did. I really love my cozy fox in the beanbag chair. It's perfect. So, yeah. Anyone you'd like to thank?
No.
Ungrateful! Then we will end on that ungrateful note. stay curious, stay a little bit mad, but above all, believe in science, even if it's mad science.